The photograph lay face down on my coffee table, glass shards scattered across the polished wood like ice crystals. I stared at the back of the frame, the one my mother had specially ordered for what was supposed to be the centerpiece wedding photo. My fingers trembled as I carefully turned it over, wincing as a sliver of glass nicked my index finger. A bright drop of blood welled up, falling onto the exposed photograph where my sister-in-law Vanessa's face should have been. Instead, there was a careful tear, removing her completely from the family portrait. "Charlotte, don't touch that, you'll cut yourself worse," my husband Michael called from the kitchen, the concern in his voice making me feel simultaneously loved and infantilized. "Too late," I murmured, sucking on my finger as I examined the photograph that had been delivered to our doorstep in a crushed package just minutes earlier. At 29, I'd finally had the wedding of my dreams 6 months ago, in the lush gardens of Biltmore Estate in Asheville. After years of saving, compromising, and planning, everything had been perfect. Or so I'd thought. Until the photos arrived from our photographer 3 weeks after the honeymoon, all of them featuring peculiar angles, awkward crops, or mysteriously blurry faces. Specifically, my face. The house phone rang, its shrill tone making me jump. Michael answered in the kitchen, and I could hear his voice drop to that low, cautious tone he used when dealing with my parents. "Yes, Mrs. Evans." "No, she's right here." "I understand your concern, but..." I closed my eyes and felt the familiar tightness in my chest. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Evans, pillars of Asheville society and owners of Evans Real Estate, had always favored my older brother James and, by extension, his wife Vanessa. The perfect son with the perfect wife. Meanwhile, I was the perpetual disappointment, the daughter who chose art school instead of business, who took 5 years to graduate, who worked as a freelance graphic designer instead of joining the family business. Michael appeared in the doorway, phone extended. "Your mom wants to talk to you," he whispered, covering the receiver. "She says Vanessa is very upset about the accusations." I took the phone, my stomach churning. "Hi, Mom. Charlotte Evans, how could you?" My mother's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Vanessa called me in tears. She says you've been telling people she sabotaged your wedding photos? That's a serious accusation against family." The weight of those words, family, pressed against my chest. In the Evans household, family loyalty was paramount. But what about loyalty to me? "Mom, something happened to those photos. They were perfect during the shoot. I saw the previews on the photographer's camera. Things happen, Charlotte. Technical errors. Poor lighting. You've always been quick to blame others for your disappointments." I flinched, the familiar sting of her dismissal burning behind my eyes. Through the window, I could see the Blue Ridge Mountains in the distance, their ancient peaks unchanging while everything in my life seemed to shift like sand. The photographer said someone accessed his equipment during the reception. "He's checking the backup files." My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to be. "This is exactly like that time in high school when you claimed someone stole your art project," my mother sighed. "You need to apologize to Vanessa. She's organized a family dinner for Sunday to clear the air." The memory of my senior art showcase flashed in my mind, the centerpiece painting missing just hours before judging, later found crumpled behind the dumpsters. Vanessa had been at that showcase, supposedly supporting James, who'd only shown up for the last 15 minutes. "I'll think about it," I said finally, knowing I wouldn't go. "Your father and I expect you there, Charlotte. Family stands together." The line went dead. Michael moved beside me on the couch, his arm around my shoulders as solid and reassuring as the mountains outside our window. "You know, I was there when the photographer was showing you the previews," he said quietly. "Those photos were beautiful. All of them." I leaned into him, grateful for the one person who consistently believed me. Michael had grown up in foster care, he understood the complicated pain of family in ways my friends never could. He knew what it meant to seek approval that never came. "I called the venue today," I said, picking up the damaged photograph. "They have security cameras covering the area where the photographer had set up his workspace. Something shifted in me, a quiet determination replacing the familiar hurt. For years, I'd accepted my role in the family, the lesser child, the one who needed to try harder, do more, be better to earn the same love freely given to James. I'd accepted blame, made excuses, tried to understand. But in that moment, holding the torn remains of what should have been a cherished memory, something hardened inside me. "I'm going to request the footage," I said, my voice steadier. Michael kissed my temple. "I'll go with you." That night, I dreamed of my wedding day again. The scent of May roses in the Biltmore Gardens, the delicate lace of my grandmother's restored veil, the way the light hit the Blue Ridge Mountains in the background as Michael and I said our vows. Perfect moments that now felt tainted. In my dream, I was walking through the reception, greeting guests, when I spotted Vanessa by the photographer's table. Her perfectly manicured hands hovering over equipment she had no reason to touch. The dreamy watched, frozen, as she turned and smiled, that same smile she'd given me at my high school showcase, at my college graduation, at my engagement party. A smile that never reached her eyes. I woke up sweating, the Carolina summer heat pressing through the open window despite the late hour. Michael slept soundly beside me, his breathing even and peaceful. I slipped out of bed and padded to our home office, where I kept a box of photographs and mementos, tangible evidence of my life's moments, good and bad. Under the dim light of the desk lamp, I spread them out: my high school art award, second place after the main piece disappeared, college graduation, my parents looking distracted in the one photo they appeared in, my first graphic design client celebration, no family present. And now my wedding, beautiful in person, disastrous in documentation. It wasn't just about photos. It was about being seen. Truly seen, not as an afterthought or a disappointment, but as a person worthy of the same care and attention given so freely to my brother. As the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, painting stripes across the scattered memories on the desk, I made a decision. At 29 years old, it was time to stop seeking validation from people determined not to give it. It was time to find my own evidence, draw my own conclusions, and stand in my own truth, even against family. I picked up my phone and pulled up the email for Biltmore Estates security office. "My name is Charlotte Evans," I typed, "and I need to see the security footage from May 12th. The first memory I have of Vanessa Martin is from my brother's university graduation party. I was 19, home from my first year at art school, still bubbling with excitement about techniques and perspectives and possibilities. James was 23, business degree in hand, already being groomed to take over a branch of Evans Real Estate. "And who is this creative little sister?" Vanessa had asked, her arm linked through my brother's, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. She was stunning, tall, sleek, with the kind of beauty that seems effortless but is meticulously maintained. I later learned she'd been Miss North Carolina runner-up 2 years prior. "This is Charlotte," my brother said, barely glancing at me. "She's at, what was it? Art school?" "Design school," I corrected, extending my hand. "Savannah College of Art and Design." "How cute," Vanessa smiled, her perfectly white teeth gleaming. "I loved coloring books as a child too." It was a small slight, easily dismissed. Just as easily dismissed as the time she accidentally spilled red wine on my portfolio the night before my internship interview. Or when she suggested to my parents that my constant drawing was perhaps a sign of social avoidance issues. Or when she accompanied my mother to choose my engagement party venue and switched the reservation to a dark, cramped restaurant instead of the garden pavilion I'd selected. Small things. Impossible to prove intentional. Easily attributed to misunderstanding or bad luck or, as my mother often suggested, my own sensitivity. The morning after discovering the damaged wedding photograph, I sat in our sunny kitchen, laptop open to my email as I waited for a response from Biltmore's security team. Michael placed a mug of coffee beside me, strong and black the way I liked it. "No response yet?" he asked, settling across from me with his own breakfast. I shook my head. "It's still early." "What exactly do you think happened?" Michael asked carefully. He knew the history, had witnessed enough of Vanessa's subtle manipulations to believe me, but he'd also seen how questioning my family's golden couple typically backfired. I began, but was interrupted by my phone buzzing across the table. James's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered on speakerphone. Charlotte, my brother's voice was terse. What's this about you accusing Vanessa of sabotage? Mom called us last night, very upset. I took a deep breath. I didn't accuse her of anything to Mom. I just said someone tampered with our wedding photos, and the photographer confirmed someone accessed his equipment during the reception. And naturally, you implied it was my wife. The defensive edge in his voice was familiar. James had always been protective of Vanessa, sometimes I thought more protective of her than he'd ever been of me, his actual sister. I didn't imply anything. I stated facts. Facts? He scoffed. Like the facts about your missing art project in high school? Or the facts about Vanessa deliberately scheduling your engagement dinner when she knew my in-laws couldn't attend? Each example he cited was a wound reopened. I caught Michael's eye across the table. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. James, we both know what's been happening for years, I said quietly. I've tried to understand it. I've tried to be the bigger person. But my wedding photos were probably just technical errors, he interrupted. The photographer is trying to cover for his mistakes by blaming some mysterious intruder. And you're eager to believe the worst about Vanessa, as always. As always? I felt heat rising to my face. When have I ever accused her of anything before? I've spent years making excuses for misunderstandings and accidents. I've spent years watching Mom and Dad fawn over her while dismissing me. There it is, James said, his voice cold. Jealousy. That's what this has always been about. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Was he right? Was this all rooted in some childish envy? I thought about the torn wedding photo, about the photographer's confused explanation, about the years of small humiliations. You need to be at dinner on Sunday, James continued. You need to apologize to Vanessa and put this nonsense to rest. She's pregnant, Charlotte. We were going to announce it Sunday, but now this drama is overshadowing our news. Again, it's all about you. The revelation of Vanessa's pregnancy should have been joyful news. I should have felt excitement about becoming an aunt. Instead, I felt a cold dread. Another tie binding Vanessa permanently to my family. Another reason my parents would prioritize her comfort over my truth. Congratulations, I managed to say. I'll think about Sunday. After hanging up, I looked at Michael, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. A baby, I whispered. He reached across the table for my hand. This doesn't change what happened, Charlotte. Doesn't it? They're having a baby. The Evans heir. Mom and Dad will be even more invested in protecting their perfect family image. Your family too, Michael insisted, a rare flash of anger in his voice. Your feelings matter. Your experiences matter. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. Biltmore Estate Security. Mrs. Charlotte Reed, the email began, using my married name, we've reviewed your request for security footage from your wedding reception on May 12th. As this is an unusual request, we'll need you to come in person with identification to view any available footage. Our security office is open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I looked up at Michael. I can go tomorrow morning. He nodded. I'll rearrange my meetings. We'll go together. That evening, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from my mother, from James, even one from my father, a rare communication that consisted only of, "Your mother is very upset. Fix this." I silenced my phone and instead pulled up my sketchbook, something I'd done since childhood whenever the emotions became too overwhelming to contain. With quick, decisive strokes, I began drawing the Evans family as I had experienced it: my father, tall and distant, attention focused on ledgers and property values; my mother, immaculate and critical, forever arranging the family into the perfect composition; James, the golden child, standing in a spotlight; Vanessa, beautiful and calculating, a carefully placed hand on each family member except me; and myself, slightly apart, edges blurred as if being slowly erased. Michael found me hours later, surrounded by sketches, some detailed, some abstract expressions of emotion. He sat beside me, examining each one without comment until he reached the last, a rendering of our hands holding a photograph frame, but instead of a picture inside, there was just empty space waiting to be filled. "This is how I've felt my whole life with them," I said softly. "Like I'm a negative space in their perfect family portrait. Present only by my absence." Michael wrapped his arms around me. "You've spent so many years trying to fit into their frame," he whispered into my hair. "Maybe it's time to create your own." That night, as we lay in bed, the mountain air cool through the open window, Michael asked the question I'd been avoiding. "If the footage shows what you think it will, what are you going to do?" I stared at the ceiling, tracing the shadows cast by moonlight through the curtains. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants vindication so badly I can taste it. But another part is afraid of what comes after," he finished for me. Yes. The truth was a weight and a relief simultaneously. If I'm right, if Vanessa did this, and I prove it, what then? Do my parents finally see her for who she is? Do they finally see me? Or do they find some way to excuse it, to blame me even for exposing her? Michael was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "Would it be enough," he finally asked, "if just you knew the truth? If you had certainty, even if no one else acknowledged it?" I considered this, the possibility of knowing but not sharing, of having private vindication. "I don't think so," I said finally. "This isn't just about the photos. It's about years of being doubted, dismissed, and gaslit. It's about whether my experience matters to the people who should care most about me." He nodded against my shoulder. "Then we get the footage. And whatever it shows, we face it together." As sleep finally claimed me, I wondered what truth awaited us in the security recordings of what should have been the happiest day of my life, and whether that truth would finally free me or simply give me the courage to walk away. The Biltmore Estate Security Office was located in a discreet building behind the main visitor center, its brick exterior blending with the historic architecture of America's largest home. Michael and I arrived early Monday morning, the spring air still crisp with morning dew as we walked from the parking area. Inside, a security manager named Douglas Harrington greeted us with professional courtesy, checking our IDs and wedding contract before leading us to a small viewing room with a computer monitor. "We've pulled the footage from the areas you specified," he explained, settling into the chair beside me. "The camera covering the reception workspace area where your photographer was set up recorded from 2 p.m. until midnight. Did you have a specific time frame in mind?" I thought back to the timeline of our reception. The photographer mentioned it would have been during the first dance or toasts, so maybe start around 7 p.m.? Douglas nodded and began queuing up the footage. The black and white video showed the small antechamber where our photographer, Eli, had set up his laptop and equipment. The main reception was through open French doors visible on the right side of the frame. "I'll leave you to review," Douglas said, standing. "There's about 5 hours of footage. Take your time, and call me if you need anything." When the door closed behind him, Michael squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding as Douglas fast-forwarded to 7 p.m. The timestamp in the corner showed 7:03 as Eli entered the frame, downloaded some images to his laptop, then hurried back to the reception where Michael and I would have been preparing for our first dance. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Occasionally guests wandered into frame, some looking for restrooms, others simply exploring the historic building. At 7:26, the camera captured a familiar figure entering the room. "Vanessa," I whispered, leaning forward. My sister-in-law moved with purpose, glancing over her shoulder before approaching Eli's equipment table. She set down her champagne glass and picked up what appeared to be a memory card. "Is that?" Michael started. "The backup card," I confirmed, my throat tight. "Eli always shoots with 2 cameras and keeps the second card as backup." We watched in stunned silence as Vanessa pocketed the memory card, then turned her attention to the laptop. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, her expression concentrated but calm. After approximately 3 minutes, she closed whatever program she'd been using, picked up her champagne, and with one final glance around the empty room, returned to the reception. I sat back, a strange numbness spreading through me. Part of me had expected, perhaps even hoped, to be wrong. To find some other explanation, some misunderstanding that would allow me to maintain the fragile peace of family gatherings and holiday dinners. The irrefutable evidence before me offered no such comfort. "Charlotte," Michael said softly, his hand still holding mine. "We should get a copy of this." I nodded mechanically. "Yes." Douglas provided us with a digital copy and a brief statement confirming the authenticity of the footage. The drive back to our home in West Asheville passed in a blur, the beautiful mountain landscape barely registering as I tried to process what I'd seen. "What now?" Michael asked as we sat in our parked car in the driveway, neither of us making a move to go inside. I stared at the USB drive in my hand, so small to contain such significant evidence. "I don't know." That afternoon, I sat in our garden, surrounded by the native plants I'd carefully cultivated, mountain laurel, rhododendron, wild azaleas, their spring blooms a riot of color against the backdrop of distant blue ridges. The contrast between their natural beauty and the ugliness of what I'd witnessed that morning felt jarring. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Expecting you Sunday at 5. Vanessa is making her special roast. Dress appropriately." The casual assumption that I would simply appear as instructed, that I would break bread with someone who had deliberately destroyed precious memories of my wedding day, ignited something in me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but a clarity I hadn't felt before. All my life, I'd measured my worth through their eyes, my parents, my brother, and later, Vanessa. I'd internalized their dismissals and disappointments, accepting their narrative that I was oversensitive, dramatic, jealous. I'd contorted myself trying to fit into their rigid expectations, sacrificing my own perceptions and intuitions on the altar of family harmony. But the evidence was irrefutable. The security footage didn't lie. My instincts had been correct. I hadn't imagined the systematic undermining, the calculated slights, the deliberate sabotage. Michael found me still sitting among the flowers an hour later, but something had shifted in my posture, in my eyes. "I know what I want to do," I said as he settled beside me on the garden bench. "Tell me." "Sunday dinner. I'm going to go." He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "After what we saw." "Because of what we saw," I corrected. "I'm done doubting myself. I'm done accepting their version of reality. I'm done being the family scapegoat." Michael studied my face. "You're going to show them the footage?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "And then I'm going to walk away." "Walk away? From dinner or?" "From all of it. The dynamic. The relationship as it exists now." I turned to face him fully. "I don't want to cut them out completely, they're still my family. But I can't keep participating in this fiction that everything is fine. That I'm the problem. That I should just try harder to fit in." Michael nodded slowly. "It's going to be messy." "It already is messy," I said, gesturing toward the house where the damaged wedding photograph still lay on the coffee table. The difference is, now I'm acknowledging the mess instead of pretending it doesn't exist. That evening, I called Eli the photographer and told him what we'd discovered. His relief was palpable. "I knew something wasn't right," he said. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never had a full set of photos corrupted like that. I've been beating myself up thinking I'd failed you." "You didn't fail me," I assured him. "But I do have a question, is there any way to recover the original photos?" Actually, yes, Eli sounded excited now. I always keep multiple backups. The card your sister-in-law took was one backup, and the files she corrupted on my laptop were another. But I have a third backup on an external drive I keep in my office safe. I didn't want to get your hopes up until I was sure, but if you give me a couple of days, I should be able to restore everything. After hanging up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The photos could be recovered. The damage, at least in this instance, wasn't permanent. But the revelation about Vanessa, and by extension, about my family's willingness to doubt me instead of her, that damage felt far deeper. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Eli delivered a flash drive with the restored wedding photos, each image as beautiful as I remembered from the preview. Michael and I selected several to print and frame, including a particularly stunning shot of us with the Blue Ridge Mountains in the background, sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I also prepared myself mentally, rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the evidence, how I would establish my boundaries going forward. Michael watched this process with a mixture of pride and concern. Just remember, he said on Sunday morning as we sat drinking coffee, their reaction isn't a reflection of your worth. Whatever happens today, you know your truth. I nodded, running my finger around the rim of my mug. I know. But part of me still hopes that they'll see it. That they'll understand. That they'll choose me, just this once. Michael's eyes were gentle but realistic. I hope so too. But if they don't, we have each other, I finished. We have our truth. And we have these mountains. I gestured toward the window where the ancient Blue Ridge stood sentinel, unchanged for millennia. There was something comforting in their permanence, in the knowledge that they had witnessed countless human dramas and would witness countless more. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward those mountains, I packed the security footage, the restored wedding photos, and the damaged frame into a tote bag. Michael kissed me at the door, offering to come along, but this was something I needed to do alone. I'll be waiting, he promised. Driving toward my parents' sprawling home in Biltmore Forest, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my memory, I wasn't going to seek their approval or validation. I wasn't going to plead my case or defend my perceptions. I was simply going to present the truth, establish my boundaries, and let them decide what kind of relationship they wanted with me going forward. The choice, for once, would be theirs instead of mine. And whatever they chose, I would finally be free. My parents' house looked exactly as it always did, immaculate exterior, perfectly maintained grounds, an architectural showcase rather than a home. I parked my modest Subaru between my father's Mercedes and James's Range Rover, the vehicle disparity a visual metaphor I couldn't ignore. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my tote bag and walked to the front door, using my key to let myself in as I'd done hundreds of times before. The familiar scent of my mother's preferred lavender polish and Vanessa's roast beef greeted me, along with the sound of conversation from the formal living room. "Charlotte's here," I announced, stepping into the doorway. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me, my father from his armchair, my mother and brother from the sofa, and Vanessa, standing by the fireplace in a flowing dress that subtly emphasized the smallest hint of a baby bump. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, a gesture that seemed both natural and performative. "You're early," my mother observed, checking her watch. It wasn't a greeting so much as a criticism. In the Evans household, timing was another area where perfection was expected. "I wanted to talk before dinner," I replied, remaining in the doorway rather than taking my usual seat on the periphery. James frowned slightly. "If this is about those ridiculous accusations..." "It's not an accusation anymore," I interrupted, surprising everyone, including myself. I rarely interrupted in this house. It's a fact with evidence. But before I get to that, I want to ask you all something. My father set down his business journal, giving me his full attention for perhaps the first time in years. "What is it, Charlotte? Why do you always doubt me? When have I ever lied to you or manipulated situations for attention? Why is your first instinct always to dismiss my experiences and believe the worst about my motivations?" The directness of my questions created an uncomfortable silence. My mother was the first to recover. "That's a very dramatic way to begin a family dinner," she said with a tight smile. "No one doubts you, Charlotte. We simply feel you tend to overreact." "Overreact," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Like when my art project went missing before the showcase? Or when Vanessa changed my engagement dinner reservation? Or now, with my wedding photos?" "Those were misunderstandings," my father said dismissively. "Were they?" I set my tote bag on the coffee table and pulled out the damaged wedding photograph in its broken frame. "Is this a misunderstanding too?" Vanessa stepped forward, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "Charlotte, I know you're upset about your photos not turning out well, but technology fails sometimes. It's unfortunate, but hardly worth this family drama." I met her eyes directly. "The technology didn't fail. You made it fail." "That's enough," James stood up, placing a protective arm around his wife's shoulders. "I won't sit here while you attack Vanessa with wild accusations. She's carrying our child, for God's sake." "I know she is," I said quietly. "And I would never want to cause stress to an expectant mother. That's why I've struggled with whether to show you this. But I can't live with lies anymore, even comfortable ones." I pulled out my laptop, opened it, and played the security footage. The room fell into stunned silence as we all watched Vanessa enter the antechamber, take the memory card, and tamper with the laptop. When the video ended, I closed the laptop and looked at each of them in turn. My father's face was unreadable. My mother looked pale. James stared at the black screen as if willing it to display something different. And Vanessa's carefully maintained composure had finally cracked. Her eyes darted around the room, calculating. "That could be anyone," she said finally, her voice higher than usual. "The quality is poor, Anne." "Biltmore Security verified it was you," I said, my voice steady. "They have the statement on file. I also have a second angle from the main reception camera showing you walking directly from our first dance to that room. No one else entered during that time period." "Why?" The question came from James, but he was looking at Vanessa, not at me. "Why would you do this?" For the first time since I'd known her, Vanessa seemed at a loss. Her perfect facade crumbled as she realized the evidence was irrefutable. I just. She always gets all the attention." The raw honesty of her outburst seemed to shock everyone, including Vanessa herself. "I get the attention," I repeated incredulously. "Me? The daughter who's been sidelined at every family event? Whose achievements have been consistently minimized? Whose concerns have been dismissed as oversensitivity? That's who you think gets all the attention?" Vanessa's composure fractured completely. "Yes. Ever since James brought me home, it's been Charlotte is so creative, Charlotte is so unique, Charlotte marches to her own drum. Do you know how hard I've worked to fit in with this family? To be the perfect daughter-in-law? To reflect the Evans image? And still, your parents look at you with this special pride they never show for me." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? Mom and Dad have always preferred James, and by extension, you. You're the ones who get the prime holiday invitations, the connections to important clients, the financial support." "Money isn't love," Vanessa snapped. "They invest in James because he's the heir to the business. But the way they talk about you when you're not around, like you're the special, artistic soul who's too good for the family business. Do you know how that makes me feel? I've done everything right, played by all their rules, and I still don't have what you have naturally." My mother finally spoke, her voice unusually small. "Vanessa, what are you saying?" Vanessa turned to her, tears now flowing freely. "I'm saying that you and Richard have put Charlotte on a pedestal her entire life. Our Charlotte, the artist. Our Charlotte, the free spirit. You've made her into something magical while making me feel like I'll never be good enough just being who I am." The revelation left me speechless. All these years, I'd believed myself to be the family disappointment, the odd one out, the less loved child. Could it be possible that Vanessa had seen something entirely different? Had my perception been that distorted? My father cleared his throat. "Vanessa, regardless of how you felt, what you did to Charlotte's wedding photographs was deliberate sabotage. It was calculating and cruel." "Richard," my mother began, but he silenced her with a raised hand. "No, Eleanor. I won't excuse this." He turned to me, his eyes troubled. "Charlotte, I owe you an apology. Not just for today, but for many days before this. I haven't been the father you deserved." His words hit me with physical force. In 29 years, I'd never heard my father apologize for anything. James was still staring at Vanessa, his expression a mixture of confusion, hurt, and anger. "All those times Charlotte thought you were undermining her, the art project, the reservation change, was that really you?" Vanessa's silence was answer enough. My mother stood abruptly, smoothing her silk blouse with trembling hands. "I think we should postpone dinner. James, perhaps you should take Vanessa home. We all need time to process this." As they left, Vanessa cast one final glance at me, not apologetic, exactly, but stripped of pretense. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not a villain, but a deeply insecure woman who had perceived me as a threat to her place in the family. The realization didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. When the door closed behind them, I turned to my parents, who suddenly looked older, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. "I should go too," I said, gathering my things. "Charlotte, wait," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "There are things we need to say to you. Things long overdue." I hesitated, then set my bag down again. "I'm listening." The formal living room that had always felt like a showpiece rather than a living space now seemed smaller, more intimate, as my parents and I circled a truth decades in the making. "I never realized," my mother began, her usual poise fractured, "how our different treatment of you and James might have felt from your perspective." My father nodded slowly. "We assumed you knew how proud we were of you. Your independence, your creativity, your willingness to forge your own path, these were qualities we admired but didn't know how to express appreciation for." "You never said," I replied simply. "Not once." "Because we didn't want to influence you," my mother explained, her hands twisting in her lap. "With James, we were clear about our expectations because he wanted to follow in the family business. But you were always your own person, Charlotte. We didn't want to sway you with our approval or disapproval." I laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "So instead, you let me believe I was a disappointment? That I was never quite good enough?" My father winced. "We failed you. Completely." He leaned forward, his eyes seeking mine with an intensity I'd rarely seen directed at me. "But Charlotte, you've never been a disappointment. Quite the opposite. Then why didn't you defend me? All those times when Vanessa was subtly undermining me, when things mysteriously went wrong, when I tried to tell you what was happening, why did you always take her side?" My mother sighed deeply. "Because it was easier to believe in coincidences than to confront the possibility that someone we'd welcomed into our family could be so deliberately hurtful. And because..." She hesitated. "Because?" I prompted. "Because you've always been stronger than James," she admitted. "He's always needed more protection, more support, more coddling. You were resilient from the day you were born." The irony was almost too much to bear. All these years, I'd interpreted their lack of protection as lack of love, when in their minds, it had been a twisted form of respect for my independence. "That's not fair," I said finally. "Being strong doesn't mean I didn't need you to believe me. To stand up for me. To make me feel like my experiences mattered." My father nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You're right. We rationalized our failures as parents by telling ourselves you were too strong to be hurt. We were wrong. The validation I'd sought for so long felt simultaneously healing and inadequate. The damage had been done, years of it, layer upon layer of doubt and dismissal. What happens now? I asked, suddenly exhausted. My mother looked at my father, then back at me. That depends on you, Charlotte. We want a relationship with you, a better one than we've had. But we'll understand if you need time. Or conditions. Boundaries, I corrected quietly. What I need are boundaries. I thought of Michael waiting at home, of the mountains that had witnessed generations of family conflicts and reconciliations, of the restored wedding photos that proved my perceptions had been accurate all along. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said finally. But things have to change. I won't accept being dismissed or gaslit. I won't participate in family events where Vanessa is present unless and until she takes genuine accountability for her actions. And I need you both to respect that Michael and I make our own decisions about our lives, without subtle disapproval or passive-aggressive comments. My father nodded immediately. Agreed. My mother hesitated only briefly before nodding as well. We'll try, Charlotte. We may make mistakes, old habits are hard to break, but we'll try. That's all I can ask, I said, standing. I need to go home now. Michael is waiting. As I walked toward the door, my mother called after me. Charlotte? For what it's worth, your wedding was beautiful. You were beautiful. And Michael is a good man, far better than we initially gave him credit for. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Eleanor Evans, it was significant progress. I drove home through the gathering dusk, the Blue Ridge Mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. The confrontation had been both more and less than I'd expected, messy, more nuanced, with revelations I hadn't anticipated. Michael was waiting on our front porch, a glass of wine in hand and another waiting for me. His eyes asked the question before his lips could form it. It's done, I said, settling beside him on the porch swing. The truth is out. As we rocked gently, watching night claim the mountains, I told him everything, Vanessa's shocking perspective, my parents' unexpected apology, the tentative new understanding. So what now? He asked when I'd finished, his arm warm around my shoulders. I took a sip of wine, considering. Now we live on our terms. With clear boundaries and eyes wide open. And Vanessa? James? That's complicated, I admitted. What she did was wrong, deliberately cruel. But understanding her motivation helps me see her as a flawed person rather than a villain. As for James, he has his own reckoning ahead. Learning your partner has been systematically undermining your sister while gaslighting your entire family isn't something you get over quickly. Michael nodded. And the baby? I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the first stars appear above the mountain ridge. That innocent child deserves loving aunts and uncles. Whatever happens between the adults, I want to be part of my niece or nephew's life. You're going to be an amazing aunt, Michael said softly. Just like you're an amazing wife, artist, daughter, and person. In that moment, on our porch with the mountains as witness, I felt something shift inside me, a burden lifting, a space opening. For years, I'd defined myself through the distorted lens of my family's perception. Now, with the truth finally exposed, I could see myself clearly, without filters or manipulations. Eli sent over the rest of the restored photos today, Michael said after a while. They're beautiful, Charlotte. Just like the day itself. I'd like to make a special album, I replied. Not just of the wedding, but of our life together. The real moments, good and bad. A true record, not an edited version. I'd like that, he agreed. And maybe someday, we'll show it to our own children. Teach them about honesty and boundaries and the courage to stand in your own truth. The thought of future children, raised in a home of transparency and genuine love, filled me with a quiet joy. They would never have to doubt their perceptions or question their worth. They would know, from their earliest days, that their experiences mattered, that their voices deserved to be heard. As night fully embraced the mountains, I found myself grateful, not just for the vindication the security footage had provided, but for the difficult journey that had led me to this moment of clarity. The path to authenticity wasn't clean or straightforward. It was messy and painful and filled with unexpected turns. But standing in my truth, surrounded by the ancient mountains and the man who had always believed in me, I wouldn't have traded it for any easier road. 1 year later, I stood in the gallery space of the Asheville Arts Council, surveying the exhibition that represented 6 months of intensive work. Perceptions, a study in family narratives, featured 20 large-format photographs paired with abstract paintings, each set exploring the contrast between external image and internal reality. The centerpiece was a triptych, my restored wedding photograph flanked by 2 paintings, one depicting the scene as others had witnessed it, bright with celebration, the other showing the emotional landscape beneath, complex layers of love, doubt, and determination. "It's powerful," said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to find my father, looking slightly out of place among the artistic crowd in his business suit. "You've created something remarkable, Charlotte." "Thank you, Dad," I replied, accepting the rare compliment with a genuine smile. Our relationship had changed over the past year, not perfected, but evolving. My parents were learning to respect boundaries, to listen more than lecture, to accept me as I was rather than as they wished me to be. The process wasn't without setbacks, but each difficult conversation brought us closer to authentic connection. "Your mother's talking to Michael near the refreshments," my father continued. "She's trying to convince him to let her throw a party for your anniversary." I laughed. "Some things never change. She still loves to organize events." "Yes, but notice she's asking, not telling." "That's progress." It was progress, indeed. Small but significant. James and Vanessa were noticeably absent from the exhibition opening, though not unexpectedly. The aftermath of the revelation had been particularly difficult for them. After months of tension and attempted reconciliation, they had entered couples therapy, an unconventional move for the traditional Evans family, but a necessary one. Vanessa had delivered a healthy baby boy 3 months earlier. I had visited once, bringing a hand-illustrated book of Blue Ridge Mountain folklore as a gift. The meeting had been awkward but civil. Vanessa's apology, when it finally came, had been stilted but appeared genuine. Time would tell whether true amends were possible, but for now, I was content with the careful distance and the opportunity to know my nephew. "Charlotte! There you are." Michael appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, handing one to me. "The Arts Council director wants to talk to you about extending the exhibition through summer. It's drawing quite a crowd." Pride surged through me, not the desperate seeking of validation that had characterized my younger years, but a solid satisfaction in work well done and honestly presented. "I should find your mother before she commits us to hosting Thanksgiving," my father said with a wry smile, excusing himself. When we were alone, Michael clinked his glass against mine. "To truth," he said softly. "To boundaries," I added. "And to creating our own frame." Around us, gallery visitors moved from piece to piece, examining the interplay between photograph and painting, between external presentation and internal reality. My work had struck a chord, particularly among those who had experienced family dynamics where perception and truth diverged. My parents had been surprised when I had first told them about the exhibition concept. "Are you sure you want to make this public?" my mother had asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm not exposing our specific family secrets," I had explained. "I'm exploring universal themes through my personal lens. This is how I process, how I heal, how I create meaning." My father had nodded slowly, a new respect in his eyes. "You always did see things differently than the rest of us." Now, watching diverse strangers connect with my work, I felt a profound sense of purpose. My experiences, painful as some had been, had value. My perspective mattered. My voice deserved to be heard. Later that evening, after the successful exhibition opening, Michael and I returned to our mountain home. We had recently finished renovating the back deck, expanding it to better showcase the panoramic view of the Blue Ridge that had become an anchoring presence in our lives. As we sat beneath the stars, a comfortable silence between us, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The confrontation that had seemed so terrifying had ultimately been liberating. Not because it had fixed everything, many things remained imperfect, but because it had freed me from the exhausting effort of trying to fit into a false narrative. "I have something for you," Michael said, interrupting my thoughts. He disappeared inside, returning with a carefully wrapped package. I opened it to find a new frame, handcrafted from local cherry wood, simple but elegant, containing a photograph I had never seen before. It showed me from behind, standing at our wedding venue, looking out at the mountains moments before the ceremony began. My shoulders were straight, my posture confident, the ancient peaks spreading before me like possibilities. "Eli found it when he was going through the recovered files," Michael explained. "He thought you might like it." I traced the frame with my fingertips. "It's perfect." It reminded me of something you said the night after confronting your family. About creating our own frame. I nodded, memory washing over me. For so long, I tried to fit into the frame others created for me, tried to make myself smaller, less distinct, more acceptable. But that was never going to work. "Because you were meant to create, not conform," Michael finished. I placed the new photograph on our outdoor table, positioned so it framed the actual mountains in the distance, image and reality in perfect alignment. "I had a call from a gallery in Charlotte yesterday," I said after a moment. "They want to feature my work in their Emerging Artists Showcase next fall." Michael's face lit up. "Charlotte, that's incredible. It would mean more time away from home, more public exposure. More opportunity to share your unique perspective with the world," he countered. "I'm so proud of you, Charlotte. Not just for your success, but for your courage in standing in your truth." As night deepened around us, the mountain air cool against my skin, I reflected on the long journey from doubt to certainty, from seeking external validation to finding internal strength. The path hadn't been straight or easy. The relationships weren't perfect. The old wounds wouldn't vanish overnight. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I felt fully present in my own story, not as a supporting character in someone else's narrative, but as the author of my own experience. I had learned to trust my perceptions, to value my voice, to establish boundaries that protected what mattered most. "You know what I love about these mountains?" I asked, gesturing toward the ancient peaks silhouetted against the starlit sky. "What's that?" Michael asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "They remind me that perspective changes everything. From a distance, they appear solid, unchanging. But they're actually in constant flux, shaped by wind and water, growth and erosion, day by day, year by year." I squeezed his hand. "Just like us." The security footage that had validated my experience was now stored away, unlikely to be viewed again. Its purpose had been served. The truth had been exposed, boundaries established, and a new reality created, one based on authenticity rather than appearances. In that new reality, I was finally free to choose which frames to keep and which to discard. Free to create my own composition instead of struggling to fit into someone else's. Free to focus my lens on what truly mattered, love freely given, truth honestly spoken, boundaries respectfully maintained, and mountains that reminded me daily that perspective was everything. "To the frames we choose," I said softly, raising my glass to the vast Carolina sky. "And to the truth within them," Michael replied. Together, surrounded by mountains older than human memory, we toasted to the view ahead, clear, unfiltered, and finally our own.